Hello and welcome back to the Doomloop Dispatch, the show covering the worst parts of the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm Kevin L. Jones, and thank you for joining me for my second episode. I'm terrible with follow through on any kind of project, so I'm pretty proud that we've made it to number 2. I mean, we're a real show, folks. All right. For this episode, I'm going to be talking to San Francisco education activist Brandee Marckmann, who co-founded the San Francisco Education Alliance. There's a lot going on in San Francisco public schools, and I really want to highlight it. Education is very important to me. I have young kids, and I feel what all the parents in San Francisco are going through. So I wanted to make sure to highlight what's going on there. Today, I want to start by following up with the election results in San Francisco. Story for me today is the turnout. 46%. Seriously low. Honestly, the presidential elections usually get twice that, honestly. I mean, even just this last November, the November 2022 election, they got 62%, almost 63% turnout. So it's clear that the right uses these low turnout elections to pass what they want. 46% is exactly the turnout they had during Chesa Boudin's recall. And this time, instead of recall, they passed propositions that both, one proposition hurts people on public assistance, and another proposition allows cops to start car chases, which, I mean, almost like it's on cue. The week after that proposition passed, we have a driver losing their life because of a car chase. Last week, or actually on Tuesday, El Cerrito police chased a burglary suspect early Tuesday morning onto I-580. The suspect, trying to get away, went the wrong way on I-580 and ran into two cars. One of those innocent drivers, probably just going to work, something like that, died. So that's the risk we run with these kind of propositions that allow cops to chase suspects. But why? Why do the cops need such leeway? Why do they need these powers? Well, for me personally, I think it's the Bay Area's real estate interests working together. The cops protect basically their main goal in life, their main responsibility is protecting property. And so that's why real estate interests want to protect their property and invest in cops. I mean, seriously, back in 2017, the UN found that $217 trillion had been invested in global real estate. Trillion, not billion, trillion. And a lot of that money is in Bay Area real estate, which is why you see YIMBYs, or Yes in My Backyard, have a big foothold here. They're all over social media telling the people that live here, we need to build more. Well, finally, some mainstream publications are fighting back. Last week, the New Republic published an essay called The Case Against YIMBYism, and it lays out all the facts that we YIMBY critics have already known, that basically free market solutions will not fix any housing shortages, nor will they lower costs in the Bay Area. It cites studies like one in 2019 on New York City that found for every 10% increase in housing stock, yielded only a 1% decrease in rent. So, sure, you might have more places to rent, but then a one bedroom is still going for over $3,500 a month, which is completely unsustainable. And as a matter of fact, Socketsite just ran a piece showing that the number of homes on the market in San Francisco are at a 13-year high. So, again, what shortage? There's no shortage. It's literally just these new landlords, these YIMBY landlords, not wanting to lower their possible rents. That's supposed to happen, but we have yet to see that. Now, do we still really need to build? I mean, YIMBYs would tell you yes. They'd also tell you that costs would lower if we just upzoned or basically removed any kind of zoning regulations or density regulations. Just build as high as you can into the sky and everything's going to be better. But an essay in 48 Hills from former San Francisco Planning Commissioner Dennis Atenor, he got into why the YIMBY solutions do more harm than good. In the case of upzoning and increase in density, he points out it's going to completely change San Francisco's character. Neighborhoods will become unrecognizable. And of course, what you would hear from YIMBYs is, who cares? I care. The people that live here care. We bought our properties or rent here because of what the neighborhood is like. It's a choice, and we choose to live here. And I'm sick of people who don't live here, or a small minority of people who do live here, but it's mostly people outside of the area telling me what I need to do with my neighborhood, telling me how my neighborhood needs to change, when truly it's not going to make a difference. Also, Antonor points out that upzoning also runs the risk of landlords keeping their properties empty to take advantage of higher rents in the future. We need to house people now, not work to make landlords more money. Now let's get to talking about California schools, or at least schools in San Francisco. Um, there's a lot going on in the San Francisco school district. After the recall of 3 board members in 2022, the new school board brought in a new school superintendent, a guy named Matt Wayne. And one of the first things Matt Wayne did when he got his position was to install a new payroll system, which ended up being a total disaster. Basically, tons of teachers stopped being paid, and the district lost millions before dropping the program. Now, Wayne says to save the district, he needs to close schools and cut staff. Is he proposing cuts to all the new middle managers he's hired? No. And what you're seeing too is forces to privatize or start more charter schools. That's what they think is going to fix everything, which we know will just cost residents more and will put more on parents, especially working class parents who are already struggling to stay in the area. So that's why I'm talking with Brandee Marckmann of the San Francisco Education Alliance. She's helping mobilize parents to fight back, but she's up against quite a force pushing for more private and charter schools in her area. In my interview with her, we go over what has happened to San Francisco schools since the pandemic, which this forced privatization first mobilized. And then we get into what's happening now. Two things we talk about that I think requires some further explanation. First off is Ann Shu, who is a former school board member that Mayor London Breed appointed to the board after the recall. Then there's Lowell High, which is a high-performing school in San Francisco with a reputation for being elitist, which really came to light after the board forced it to change its admissions policy to be a lottery. Parents and alumni fought to reinstate the old achievement-based admissions policy, which is why they were a big part of recalling the board members in 2022. Awesome. Well, let's kick it off. Brandee, why don't you introduce yourself?
All right. My name is Brandee Marckmann. I am one of the organizing members of the San Francisco Education Alliance. We are a group of parents, educators, city college students, city college faculty, and we are organizing for fully funded, equitable K-12 and community college in San Francisco and beyond in the state of California. And
Oh,
be on the show. Thank you.
yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. And yeah, that's a great goal to reach. So fingers crossed. Am I right?
Well, we're cut out for us, but we've got a lot of energy and a lot of passion and good strategy. So we are determined to get there.
Yes, totally. But you've been involved in San Francisco politics for a long while now. Can you describe a little bit of your story, or tell a little of your story?
Yeah. So I have lived in San Francisco for about, just about 20 years right now. I think the first thing I did was in 2016 serve as a precinct captain for Sandra Lee Feuer's D1 campaign. Did that, volunteered for Allison Collins, Gabriel Lopez, and Fauga Molinga's school board races, joined San Francisco Bernie-crats, was asked to be to serve as co-chair and was by Brandon Harami, who is an Oakland organizer and staff at Mayor Sheng Tao's office, was elected to that. And yeah, so even though I've lived here, I guess since 2004, really didn't get active here beyond doing a lot of phone banking for Barack Obama and Bernie Sanders. When I lived in Iowa, which is where I'm from, I was a precinct captain during the presidential caucuses in 2000 for Bill Bradley. So I guess you could say it goes back to that. And I guess really I cut my organizing teeth. I am a former educator. For 5 years, I ran an adult ESL program in Des Moines, Iowa. And there was he was a state senator at the time, former Congressman Steve King from Western Iowa. I actually grew up in his district, had this very racist English only bill, which would mandate making English the official language of Iowa, which is kind of ridiculous in so many ways. It was just, something conservatives do is just constantly kick down folks. Anyway, I did some organizing around that, trying to get that bill stopped. We did first successfully, and then it came back for another session. So yeah, I've been. This is what I'm doing right now is not my first rodeo. I've been doing this for almost a little over 20 years.
Wow. Well, we really appreciate it because there's a lot of work to be done in a big battle ahead of us, So, now the Education Alliance, SF's Education Alliance, I believe you helped start that. Why did it come together?
It was a response to a lot of things, and I think just people wanting to see a group really focused on improving our public schools and community colleges. So there's been this nationwide attack on public schools that I think everybody, I don't want to say everybody, but lots of folks are aware of. I don't think at the time the recalls happened that a lot of people in San Francisco recognized what this was, what was going on here was really a nationwide thing. We know that Steve Bannon in a podcast said, I think just a couple of months after the January 6th insurrection, was the way to take back the country was through school boards. So that is why you've seen a lot of these right-wing attacks. It's an attack on progressives, an attack on Democrats. And it's also, and a lot of it is motivated by anti-Black racism. So it was a response to that. It was really wanting to, but not just to fight that, to really bring people together and bring forth positive change for our community colleges, and our public schools.
Wonderful. Now, what is the state of affairs? I mean, yeah, what is it currently like at San Francisco USD? I mean, how would you describe the situation there?
Wow, I'll see if I can answer that
I
question.
know.
Well,
Sorry to put that all on you.
no, I just want to say, I have a son who's a middle schooler, and so he loves school. I can say, like, you read things in the paper, and it's been doom loop, around like how bad our schools are, how they're failing our kids. And yes, I mean, there are a lot of amazing things about our public schools, but they also deal with a lot of the problems that they don't exist in a vacuum. They have to, they are sort of like where the fact that our society has not dealt with poverty, has not dealt with a lot of things, have not dealt with assisted raiment, that shows up at public schools. But so my child is having a fantastic experience. It's so and I know students struggled, he struggled at times. So that's sort of a micro. It is it's very difficult right now. We have had, as some people know, this was actually in, I think, early 2022, the district went to a new payroll system called Empower. And it has just malfunctioned for, I guess, going on 2 years now. And over a year ago, UESF, we have an amazing teachers union, had said we need to really get rid of Empower. We need to go to a different system. And because teachers weren't being paid on time, or they were not being paid, they were not getting their health insurance, or they were being paid too much, and it messed up when they went to file income taxes. And it was just that, I think, has been the hardest thing on our system. And I'm not sure why that hasn't been fixed, or if it's I can't say speak to that. But I think teachers are just really frustrated. This is a larger, and this is happening all over. Like, not this, hopefully not this payroll system. And this payroll system debacle was, you know, it's famous. I have a book here. It's called "Punished for Dreaming" by Bettina Love, and how school reform harms Black children and how we heal. And it named the payroll debacle that's been going on. So, yeah, so until that really gets fixed and remedies, I think this will continue to be a problem. It's been hard on teachers. We have some amazing, so many of our teachers are amazing, but it's just been hard on morale, because people aren't going to want to work for a district where they're not being paid. And I'm not sure what's going on as far as why folks in charge of that aren't being held accountable, but there's that. So that is probably the biggest thing that is going on in our schools. And then we know that the superintendent that we have now, Matt Wayne, this came from Hayward, where he tried to close a lot of schools. And so he was selected when we had a majority pro recall board, when we had the majority of our school board. I think he was selected for the job in the early, I think the middle of 2022. This is why they wanted to take up the board. So we know what Hayward closed schools. There was a lot of effort to fight back. And so it was no surprise to any of us that this is what he would probably try to do when he came to district. And so we see him, going doing on local news saying, oh, we have to close schools. And, a lot of us are very skeptical if that really needs to happen. We also know people are very interested in San Francisco real estate. SFUSD is the second largest landowner, in San Francisco, right behind the Catholic Church. So that's why the real estate industry puts so much money into the recalls, into school board races. So yeah, those are two things that are going on. And some schools are not in danger of being closed or merged, but even if I'm going to say to parents, even if you're at a school where that's probably not going to happen, you are going to be impacted. Parents are being told, I know in the middle school level, that we need to have most of our classes up at around 33 students.
Oh,
so yeah,
many.
that's not going over well with parents at my kid's school. It's not great. And this is also sort of why are we at where we're at? I think there are a couple of things. First, back in 1978, Prop 13 reform. Prop 13 was passed. And that's one thing that we're working on is school finance. And so Prop 13 was a result of Reagan, just of that mentality to really basically do away with public schools, this idea that private can always do it better. It made it impossible. It made basically the state of California, once that was passed, stopped reassessing local property taxes for both homes and commercial real estate. So we have corporations like Disney and ExxonMobil paying the same dollar amount as they did in 1978. So you multiply that by all these commercial properties, and we basically have the real estate money that has been stealing money from our kids, from our community colleges for over decades. And we almost put a stop to that commercial property tax loophole. In 2020, there was Prop 15, Schools and Communities First. And people have been saying for years and years, oh, you won't be able to do anything to Prop 13. It's just this third rail of California politics. We got 48% of the vote. And that was despite not being able to do things that are bread and butter for organizers, which is in-person door knocking.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, and that was a Zuckerberg thing too, right? Which is also surprising. Was the Chan
he
Zuckerberg
started
Foundation was
that.
actually, but
Yeah,
they didn't do enough though. They tried.
I know. Yeah, yeah. So it's been, why sort of we are. That is probably the number one issue, and it's very frightening. This year in the November election, there's going to be a statewide ballot initiative that was put on by a really horrible group called the California Business Roundtable that would make it impossible to raise taxes in any jurisdiction in California except by a 2/3 vote. It
Oof.
is so bad, Kevin, that I would want to move from California if it passed.
Yeah.
So there are some. We're working with one of the most amazing groups that we work with is Evolve California. I encourage everybody to go to their website, sign up, get involved with them. We have been going around to farmers markets with them and getting people to sign petitions to encourage Governor Newsom to support Prop 13 reform. So, so we think about, kind of what's going on in San Francisco, but I think one thing San Francisco organizers really need to do is think statewide and organize statewide. When I was doing some phone banking for this, I probably made about 300 calls during before the November 2020 election, and everybody in San Francisco was thinking that it would pass because everybody here. I don't want to say everybody, but I think it got like 75% of the vote here.
Mm-hmm.
But I made calls to Democrats in Orange County, and it was just there's just not that level of enthusiasm. They got really targeted very heavy by ads. So this is something we have to do. This is the reason why we have so much dysfunction in the state of California is because of this proposition that was passed 40 years ago. So I think that the number one thing we can do for our schools, and for half of this money would go to schools and community colleges, the other half would go to county governments to use their things like libraries, transportation, housing. So I really feel like the number one organizing goal that we have is to stop this ballot initiative, the really bad one, from passing, and then defeat it, just crush it, and then in 2 years, hopefully, we'll have that opportunity again. This would have brought in $1 billion just to the city and county of San Francisco every year. Half of that would have gone to schools. So if we'd had more folks, instead of people who were angry about school renaming, angry about Lowell being desegregated, and if we'd had all that folks and all that energy go into trying to get Prop 13 reform, we would have a very different situation right now.
Totally. And yeah, I don't think people realize it, but there's some great books about what Prop 13 did to California, which is basically destroy it in many ways, especially the school system. Before Prop 13, every school was like perfectly funded. Every team, every sports team got new uniforms every year, and it was equitable. There wasn't there's probably bad schools in some senses, but it's not like the disparity you have now, where you have some schools where they have everything they want because they have a strong parent alliance. So there's a lot of fundraising on the side. They can make it more equitable, while on that same end, on other schools, they don't have air conditioning, and they're in like desert areas. They can't replace windows when they're broken. It's a serious disparity, and it's terrible, and it's one of the worst things about California that still haunts the state.
Yeah, most definitely. And I've seen that just in my neighborhood. My son went to school at Sutro Elementary School, which is a school that receives Title I funding. Brilliant school, amazing school. And then just about 6 blocks away, there's another elementary school called Peabody. They raise $600,000 a year for their PTA. And I think our school would raise maybe $30,000 a year. So just within San Francisco, you have just this wide variance of like what gets funded and what doesn't, what has more after school programs and even smaller class sizes. So yeah, I think that is one thing. Parents are obviously extremely busy, how it is. We've got work, we've got, our kids. And so just finding time to organize and learn about issues like mobilizing for Prop 13 reform when your school is just when everybody's, and this is no disrespect for PTAs. There is so much love. I know parents. I'm a member of my child's PTA right now. They do amazing things, but it also stops us from kind of looking at the bigger picture and thinking like, why do we have to bake cookies so our kids can have the things that they really deserve and need? So
Pencils and books.
yeah,
You're doing bake sales for the basics.
right. No, I remember one year my kid got a letter home. A letter was sent home from our teacher asking us to donate glue sticks. So like, why is it in this city that says the state that says it values art so much? Do teachers not have these things at their disposal? So
Yes, they have to buy them themselves.
yeah.
Yeah, and that brings up a very good point too, is that while even parents are very busy, their children are still, their number one focus. And so parents as a whole, as a demographic, are are a big motivator for a lot of the recalls and changes because they're being scared. This is happening to your school. What's going on with their school? And the pandemic too led a lot of this kind of motivation for parent groups to get more involved, even though, as we know too, there's money behind them, and these groups aren't necessarily that what they say they are.
Oh yeah.
And they are actually the ones that kind of led the recalls in 2022. Now, the recalls and this movement, how much would you say are these the recalls and these movements responsible for the issues SFUSD is facing now?
I think they're very much responsible. Yes, there was a lot of money behind them, and you're absolutely right. In politics, sometimes we saw these conservative groups never let a crisis go to waste, right? So people were at a state of anxiety during the pandemic. Trying to work with a child on Zoom or several child on Zoom and toddlers, it was just very, very, very difficult for a lot of parents who were working from home. And so, but then I was someone who was, and I think to be honest, I don't want to say most parents, I don't speak for most parents, but most of the parents that I talked to, I didn't want my child going to school during the pandemic because I didn't want to get COVID because I hadn't had a vaccine.
Yes.
I know. I didn't want my child's teacher to have to risk their life. We're in this weird state. Pandemic is still going on, but we forget sometimes 1 million people died from COVID. We have people continuing to succumb to COVID. And so it was such a terrifying time. And I just couldn't understand. I don't know if people just did. I think this is just how little we value our teachers' lives sometimes. And I think also parents and just people in general are very easy to manipulate when they're sleep deprived, when they're stressed. And so you've got like, we need to open the schools. And I can see for some families who are, they're living in San Francisco, they're both trying to make ends meet. I never really can't, this is just my organizing principle, cancel or disregard anybody I disagree with. I can see, and I have some empathy from where people were coming from, who were, kind of in this panicky stage. But I also, at the end of the day, it's like, how can we have our kids go to classes where, and not just make this a parents versus teachers thing. Like I was worried about, we worry about our teachers being able to survive. Literally, your teacher can't teach if your kid can't learn if your kid is in a coffin.
Yeah.
These are like, we don't even like to talk about these things anymore, which is, very understandable. I mean, COVID was just horrible. It was horrifying, but it was very striking. I know that SFUSD sent out a survey and asked parents, which parents wanted schools to open. I think it was 83% of parents who are white wanted them to open. My kid's school at the time is predominantly Asian, and I think it was something like 33% from that population, because these are the populations who got hit hardest by COVID. So yeah, there was a lot of that. And they have ties to, they like to say we're small, we're grassrootsy. There's one, I'll just name them, the SF Parent Coalition. They are a part of an organization called the National Parents Union. And they are not quite to the level of Mothers of Liberty fascism, but they sort of surf on a lot of that. And one of their board members is a member of Democrats. This is the National Parents Union, which I think is based in Massachusetts. It's run by Carrie Rodriguez, who's gone on Fox News. She is a member of Democrats for Education Reform, which is a right-wing pro-charter school organization. So these are pro-privatization. And they might not just come out and say, "Oh, we want to have charter schools," because right now, charter schools are, and I'm not anti-charter school as much as I am anti-charter school industry. Like, exactly. Like, I have no beef. Parents put their kids in charters. I have friends who send their kids to charters, but it's really kind of the money that's behind this. And yeah, so these groups that say they're organic, I mean, a lot of their senior staff make over, this is the San Francisco Parent Coalition, make over six figures. They they get, their political action committee is funded by two billionaires, one Michael Moritz, another Mimi Haas, Miriam Haas. Her son is running for mayor. Daniel Lurie says he wants to do a lot for SFUSD, but has his kid in private school.
Yeah.
So yeah, these people, and you don't really, and I'm so glad you're doing this this Doomloop podcast, Kevin, because you really don't get our mainstream, our news organizations doing deep dives into these people. Like, who are these people?
Yeah.
How much money are they making? Where is their money coming from? And then San Francisco Guardians, those people, Shivaraj and Autumn Lloyd, this is really what alarmed me. I think it was in March of 2021, just 2 months after the insurrection, they went on Glenn Beck to try to get help for their recall. And I was just shocked. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really terrifying. And these people are brand new to San Francisco. We're brand new to San Francisco. They moved into San Francisco specifically, I think, in December, and then filed recall papers in February. A friend of mine, Emily Mills, and if you're on Twitter, she's at SF Mills, found basically video of him at speaking at a Pleasanton school board meeting because he was upset about schools being closed.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're upset about your kids' schools being closed, why would you move to San Francisco? All of this stuff just really doesn't make sense. And I think just days after the recall was over, the recall election in February, his kid was quoted as, like, in a newspaper at another school in the Bay Area. So I don't even know if these kids have ever had, if these people have kids who are in SFUSD. And now we have Autumn Lloyd running for D5, which was the whole basis of the 8th grade algebra argument. But that's another topic.
Oh yeah. Oh no, we'll get into that.
Oh,
but you brought up a bunch of things. Of course, the first thing about charter schools, it's true. You got the volunteer, like a community coming together to start a charter school, and that's usually successful. That's usually around because of community investments. But when it's corporations running them, they have no responsibility to stay open, so they don't provide any stability for their students or anything. I remember when I was working at the Novato Advance, there was the Marin School of Arts and the Marin School of Arts and Technology, and I remember they were getting big grants from the Gates Foundation, and I don't think they lasted 5 years. They seriously, and they got big grants, which they gave to themselves, they gave to their like administrators, paid themselves out, and then boom, and just left all these kids. And and the thing is too is that with these charter schools is that they really try to get, I mean, there's some that are just trying to get the best students. There's others that really try to sell themselves as being the best for students that have learning disabilities and stuff like that. And guess what? All those kids just screwed, just
Yeah.
have nothing. 1 in 5 charter schools makes it. 1 in 5. That's terrible. That's
Wow.
20% success rate.
Yeah.
But also with the recalls, yeah, it was during the pandemic. Everyone's freaked out. Everyone wants it. Yeah, everyone's getting so frustrated because especially too, teachers themselves with online learning, they were thrown into the fire. They were
Yeah.
trained for it. They were prepared for it. No one, gave that. There's no school or there's no part of an education, like a teacher certificate that has in its training how to do it over Zoom. There's nothing like that. Everyone was, but of course people were frustrated and stuff. But then out of nowhere, it's so crazy with Siva Raj and Adam Lugin. First you saw it coming when you saw the backlash to the renaming of the schools, which made sense at the time. Schools aren't open. They can't really do any business. Might as well do this other thing that the community wants, that the school, they've been told we want to do this stuff. But then, yeah, it was so insane. It was that December. It's like, they enrolled their kids, Lugin and Raj, or at least I think just Raj did. I think Lugin's kids are actually still in like Livermore or whatever she's
Los
from.
Altos, yeah.
Yeah. And then next thing you know, they're the face of the recall. And while they've also admitted though too that they got over $300,000 for their campaign efforts.
Oh yeah, they got I'm not sure, but they got funded by I think at least three billionaires. Michael Moritz, Arthur Rock, who's 90 years old, and he funds charter schools all over. Also, William Obendorf, who is a Republican, who's funded a lot. So yeah, and San Francisco was just kind of the test case, for basically what has happened in it was basically built up to recalling Chesa Boudin. So we also I think we found a YouTube video of Shiva doing I can't, unfortunately the name of it is escaping me, but he was on YouTube working for it was some organization that was funded by or supported by Michael Bloomberg. And it was to basically help employers get H-1B visas for their employees more quickly. So it was bipartisan, but to say that like, oh, I'm just a dad, and no one ever questions this narrative. Like, where did these people come from? They also went to Y Combinator's startup school.
The big concern and one of the kind of punishments post lockdown is everyone saying, or criticism, not punishment. Criticism is that the lockdown led to like a lack or not a lack, a lag in learning, and that the students fell behind. Are you seeing that at all?
There's this concept called learning loss. And while there was a time when kids could not keep up with their lesson, there are some kids who are I just want to unpack this whole notion of what behind is. This is a sort of a metric that is artificial. What does it mean what a kid is behind? And that that's just sometimes it's unfortunate. It was the disruption was really hard on our kids, but it was the best decision that I think the district could make at the time to keep kids safe. So kids can make that up, and then I just think it's all a balancing act. I mean, we lived through a pandemic, so yeah, we might not have kids who have whatever high test score we think they need to have, but the most important thing is that they're safe, their teachers were safe, because 1 million people in the US didn't have that experience. So, there's a lot of difficult things that happened after the pandemic, but to me, that is if people were so concerned back then about keeping schools open and making sure that kids could succeed academically, where is the money right now for smaller class sizes, for more paraprofessional? Where is all of this?
For filtration systems.
Yeah, exactly. We have in Buena Vista Horace Mann, a school in the Mission District, those students have had, like, they went to, I think, for at least a year. I don't know how long the problem was, but there was lead in the drinking water that was at dangerous levels. So
you would talk about affecting your learning.
Yeah, exactly. We need to have all of our school districts have updated HVAC system. So yeah, there's a lot our schools need, but our schools have just been defunded. So at the end of, like, there's a lot going on. It really just come down to money.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there are also a lot of for a lot of people for whom the recall has been a grift. I mentioned the San Francisco Parent Coalition. The leader of that organization, Meredith Dodson, took a selfie of herself holding up this book. And she said it was a gift for someone. And the title, I can't remember the title of the book. It's probably one you shouldn't read or buy anyway. But the subtitle was How Teach for America was such a great thing. And so this was about a year ago. And so I saw that, and it made me worry. I don't want, I know a lot of the people who go through Teach for America were well-meaning kids, but we need to have teachers who have credentials, who are experienced, who get the training that they need and that our kids need to help our kids being successful. So I think they're not quite the popular thing they were 15 years ago. But unfortunately, about 3 months ago, I think, our district signed a contract with Teach for America. Because, yeah, so I just, yeah, so there it is. One, we might not have charter schools right now, but we have Teach for America. A few months, I think it was in September of last year, the district signed a contract with an organization called CAIO, and it was founded by the Meredith Dodson's sister. They use a kind of therapy called applied behavior analysis with children with autism. And my late brother had autism, and I have a friend, just an organizing friend, and she has autism. She told me she went through, her parents put her in ABA's therapy when she was a kid. They probably meant well, but she said it was very harsh, very rigorous. It's a little less so today, but the person who invented ABA therapy also actually is the same person who designed gay conversion therapy.
Oh, God.
I know. And so why are we giving these contracts? Well, we cannot recruit and retain enough paraprofessionals to work with our kids with autism. So we're going to use a private company that is not a union, company, does not train its people well. So there's a huge grift. There's also this horrible program called Dreambox. Math teachers hate it. It is an online learning program. For people who just didn't, a district or people saying, kids shouldn't be behind screens. Our district spent $2 million on this program called when our math teachers clearly didn't want it. So, the district is just not listening to its teachers right now.
Yeah, that's so much. I mean, yeah, that's Teach for America, and all these other groups are just there to siphon away money. It's just like their ways of doing it. And I know it's almost like Teach for America almost too is kind of like the who is the Pied Piper of gentrification, right? So that's on the way. Here it comes. But I was bringing up to the whole kind of stats thing, and this kind of prioritization of it, when truly, if you talk to people that are in the education world, who's worked as educators, not just people that want to siphon money, and like want to have their own nonprofits, like the people that actually teach know that these metrics aren't that great, but yet there's still this parental desire to always focus on that for some parents. We saw that big time with Lowell. Like, it really seemed like when I don't know, was it 2018? Whenever they decided to remove whatever system they had, the admissions policy, or at least change the admissions policy for Lowell, that it the backlash was insane. Why do you think that? Why do you think that was such a lightning rod for the right? And I mean, what? Why were they so against just people, making it a fair system for students to attend there?
Um, yeah, because of elitism and anti-Black racism and ableism as well. So Lowell's admissions policy is actually illegal. There is a California code that says that comprehensive high schools cannot have admissions policies that that don't use an unbiased random selection process. So what Lowell is they use grades, they use test scores. I think until recently they're using an essay. And it's against the law to do this. And so, but a lot of parents want to have a more segregated system for their kids. They don't want to have kids with disabilities or learning disabilities in their child's class because they have this misconception that that's going to lower, the quality of education that their child receives, which is ridiculous. Our teachers know how to teach various levels within classes. I mean, even my child, does well in school. I don't want him in a segregated class. I want him learning side by side with his peers with disabilities. So ultimately, it's segregation. And the drive for Lowell actually came from the Black Student Union. In 2016, they had a walkout just saying, this is just such a toxic, our school is so toxic. We're having to hear, the N word on a regular basis. They wanted, so, people say, oh, this came from our school board commissioners. They wanted to destroy Lowell. No, these are students saying, this is not a level playing field. This needs to stop. This is a toxic environment. I know of parents who have kids with disabilities at Lowell and have said now, it is there, and there are some amazing teachers there. I want to be clear. This is not dissing, all Lowell teachers, but as an atmosphere, just are not great about making sure their kids feel included. So this is just an exclusionary. We're not going to probably have book bans in San Francisco like you've seen in sub-public schools. But this is sort of a San Francisco kind of racism, is that a lot of parents just don't want their kids going to class with children of color, children who don't look like them. So that at the start, it's segregation, and anti-Black racism definitely drove this recall. It drove 8th grade algebra. It drove a lot of things. Yeah, so a lot of this is just parents being very elitist, and when it comes down to it, it is a form of segregation to have this kind of policy. And it may not, say that it might not be a, Jim Crow school like a Jim Crow school would be in the South, but it basically is that policy at the end of the day. And yeah, those parents are very well organized. It was moved to make the admissions policy equitable, so all students would have a fair shot going to Lowell, was from the superintendent, because I think this is in fall of 2020 when kids couldn't take the regular standardized tests that they had taken. I mean, it was just a very different time, obviously, when kids were on Zoom school. And so they changed the admissions policy. And what we saw was we had more Latinx, Black students, more students with IEPs, individualized education plans, or just students with disabilities. We also saw more newcomer students, students who didn't speak English fluently. And I mentioned for me, this is really, important. Having worked with ESL students, we should have all of our students, if they are brand new to the US, they should have the same opportunity to go to Lowell as any other student.
you've brought up the 8th grade algebra thing. Could you explain more about that? Because there was this proposition that just passed that is advisory. It really doesn't do anything. It's just like, and basically, I think the SFUSD has already agreed to bring back algebra to 8th grade. What can you please break down what this whole debate is about?
Yeah, Prop G was just goofy. But it's worse than just being goofy. So I guess I could maybe just back up a little bit. This is probably something that sort of started nearly 14 years ago in SFUSD. The district used what is known as the Common Core curriculum, which is a federal curriculum, and its 8th grade algebra class was really packed and really dense, and only about half of SFUSD students were passing it. The other half weren't. Even if students were passing it, there might not be enough room for the quote unquote more advanced class. So guess who, and it would be sometimes by teacher discretion, who got into that class. So who a lot of times were the kids not getting into those classes? Kids with disabilities, black and brown kids. So it was basically setting up this tracking and a form of another form of San Francisco form of segregation. And so the entire math department worked with mathematicians from Stanford to revamp the entire curriculum. And instead of having all of these algebraic concepts taught in 8th grade, they spread them throughout the curriculum. And so I helped my kid with his homework, and I've seen like they're learning. And it's, if you actually, I don't know if these people have ever taken time to go onto SFUSD's maths website, but they teach algebraic concepts in the lower grades in lower elementary school. So it slows it down, but it spreads it out. So what the district changed its policy, I think, or its curriculum sequence in 2014, and they saw a huge advantage or a huge benefit. They saw more kids were going through 4 years of math. Their science grades were getting better because once you really understand math, you can understand science. Math is a language of science. And one thing that is really different about the curriculum, as opposed to when I went to school, there was one way to solve a math problem, the fastest way. Now we have calculators. We don't have to do all those kinds of sequences on paper in our head, but it really teaches students how to think about math in a really in-depth level. Like if you solve one problem one way, you have to explain to your teacher how to solve it 3 different ways. What this does is this is what employers are looking for. This is what colleges and universities are looking for, are students who really understand math in depth. For example, when a programmer works at Google, he, she, or they might have to talk to 5 different departments about an algorithm they came up with. So they really need to know how to communicate with a bit. So, and so this is something that was very contentious when is talked about. But a lot of it was known as a success. Became a huge success. And so math departments all over the US started using SFUSD's curriculum. There was a very successful, the National Council of Teaching Mathematics saying detracking is really the way to go. This is not like when I was in school and kids in special education were in bungalows. We have kids learning together, because once a kid is on a track for a lower level, that child is going to be less likely to go on to college. What it does do is make kids if they want to take advanced calculus, they have to take more like 2 math courses their junior year. Or it's their junior or sophomore year, I can't remember. It is not ideal. So it's not a perfect system, but there are all of these rumors that say, oh, you can't get into a UC if you go through SFUSD's math. All this stuff that just isn't true. And so, but it's been this moral panic on the west side where I live in the Richmond district. So-and-so took away 8th grade algebra, like you took away math from a kid. How dare you take away? So they have kind of demonized the people who have promoted this kind of very successful curriculum. So the recallers got their way, though. the superintendent is basically just kind of a puppet of these groups like the San Francisco Coalition, San Francisco Guardian. So the district is going to spend money. I think it was in February, they had a vote, and the only commissioner who voted against it was Commissioner Kevin Bogus, was to revamp the curriculum to the tune of $18 million.
Oh,
While we
God.
have so this is what a lot of kids, this was just, people listening to loud parents.
Mhm.
And some of I've been in school board meetings and heard some parents say these things that they're and shoe level racist, like, you know, well, black and brown kids, they don't have the study skills that, and I'm just like, how can you say this? Like my kid's best friend is Latino, and I can see the love and the care his parents, have about his academics. And so there is just this, a lot of people don't say that. A lot of people think that though.
Yeah.
It's shocking. I don't want to say it's shocking to me, but a lot of people tend to think that San Francisco is a less racist place than it actually is. And when
Yeah.
it comes to people's kids, though, when it just, there's a really amazing book called, I think it's Mothers of Mass Destruction, and it talks about a lot of times how white women have driven a lot of these segregationist measures. And it's, they're not just Republicans, they're Democrats as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because because their children provide them this excuse that, well, then it doesn't matter. I'm doing it for my children. Like, it does. I don't care what. It's my child. Like, I remember talking. I mean, because I remember several years back in Berkeley, Berkeley High was considering removing its AP classes so they could take that money and spread it out better, so there you would stop the tracking for these for other students, and it would be more equitable. But there's those parents that were like, no way, we're not giving this up. We're not giving up these special classes for my students, even though the students themselves actually hated them and didn't want the stress.
Yeah.
They didn't want it. But it's these parents, and I've talked with people about it before, like, yeah, I don't care if it's gonna help other students. If I think it hurts my kid, then I don't care. It doesn't matter. How do you feel about the coverage being on the other side of it, especially when it comes to reporters like Jill Tucker from the San Francisco Chronicle?
Yeah, I just, as a blanket statement, would tell people not to believe anything they read in the San Francisco Chronicle from Jill Tucker or from Heather Knight. But I think this is also just a part of our landscape at large, is that our corporate media tends to center the needs of white parents. I know there was a story about a middle school once that I think and all middle schools have kids, who struggle. I mean, kids are going through puberty. It's a tough time. Like, oh my gosh, my middle school years, they were wild. But there were some, I can't even remember what it was, but Heather Knight's coverage of this school was very racist. And the superintendent at the time, Vince Matthews, actually wrote like a blog post or Medium post about how upset he was at the coverage. And I don't want to just call everybody out. I also want to call people in. There's an amazing organization called Showing Up for Racial Justice that really asks white folks to do some self-reflection, and say, like, how have we contributed to this problem of white supremacy in our schools?
Unpacking your privilege, unpacking the knapsack.
Yeah, it should be like a required thing that everybody be a part of it. It's just, yeah, it's very important. So I wish people, I would love to see some of our indie media do a little more. Well, they've been doing more. I wish I would have seen a little bit more from some of our other organizations, like 48 Hills. I think people tend to think of like education as like this little thing. 48 Hills and Mission Local have done a lot of amazing things, but I think I want to lift up two of our news outlets, El Tecolote and the Bayview, they did really amazing analysis of the recalls from a racial justice lens. So
Oh, great.
yeah, so but no, it's just it's but I guess I've never thought that corporate media would be on my side for the things that I'm working toward. But and I guess really it comes back to, and so I'm thrilled, we've got the Doomloop, doing this kind of these kinds of deep dives into things. um, but I think too, it's like, what do we need to do as organizers and parents out on ground is just talk to people. We need to not just kind of get out of our bubbles. Like I will say with the recallers, they did an amazing job of organizing. They were in front of supermarkets. I mean, they got lots of money. They
That
had
helps.
more money backing them. But Lowell High School they had like it was like a drive-through where you could go to Lowell High School and sign these petitions to get rid of our school board members, a black teacher, a Latina teacher, Samoan social. Come to Lowell and sign this petition. I'm not saying it was officially Lowell High School, but there were definitely people who were Lowell adjacent.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just we've got to do that organizing. We've got to do and some people, because we have a lot of people in our movement who are activists, but they haven't really moved on to being organizers. And what are being organizers? Just talking to people and asking them to talk to people. Talking to people about why we need to, as parents, focus on Prop 13 reform, and not just parents, people who aren't parents, because I think the moderates have really understood, education is something that they can use kind of to their benefit in not such a great way, to get people riled up, enraged to engage. But how do we get people to really get excited and about a vision of better schools, of fully funding schools, of joyful schools?
Yes.
Yeah, so that is our question, and we are working on answering that and doing the best we can.
Yeah, and it's like I don't think people understand how much the students will appreciate having schools that they can go to where everyone is excited and there's not this elitism where it's just like about bringing everybody up. I don't think people give educational science the credit it deserves. But it's truly over decades now, we can teach people so well. Like we know what to do, but it's still up against this kind of public system that's much more about kind of siphoning money to corporations. That's why you get these like terrible like very generic curriculums, and like when you could really I mean, teachers a well-trained teacher really knows how to do this stuff. Also, people I see a side of this that wants less empathy in the world, that wants more selfishness, that empathy and sympathy and considering a community is a weakness, They want sociopaths
Yeah.
driven for success over everything.
Yeah. I I once heard, I can't remember his name, a lecturer at the JCC. I think he was the author who wrote Bowling Alone. And his name escapes me right now, but he talks about sort of what has happened in public education, and is that we just are, or just not even public education. We think of our children as just like our biological kids. We don't really see our children like we need to take care of all kids. Like if there's something, if there's an education policy, it might not immediately benefit my child in the way that I think is, but if it benefits someone else, that is important to me as a parent to care about, how other kids are doing. So yeah, and I think it's too the Bay Area. There's I know I was talking to some parents who, one of them was at the school, a pro eighth grade algebra mom, talking about how her parents always had these very high expectations of her. And not that we don't have high expectations of kids, but just trying to also build a relationships with our kids. So where if they struggle in school, that we can still be there for them, that they feel that conditional love. And I think, a lot of times parents do, but there are some times when, I mean, I'll just be real, and I'm sometimes sort of horrified. It just like parents are just like, you got to get your, into an Ivy League. You got to go to Lowell, and
Still
I
status obsessed.
status obsessed. I see, having been an ESL teacher, I can see where immigrant parents are coming from. Just, really struggling, trying to figure out how, but I also think that that anxiety is really whipped up by people who have money. So why aren't we all working together to make sure that our English language learners have smaller class sizes, where if they get, how they get what they need? Because I've I've listened in on some meetings for there's an organization called um, it's a committee, the District English Language Learners Advisory Committee, and those parents have a huge reasonable beef with their kids not getting the support they need in academics. So I see where that anxiety is coming from, and I think too, if we also work to organize, I think there is some reasonable anxiety parents have, because it just gets more expensive to live here in the U.S. But this is not a way, and when to really go about that is just by feeding that. So I see a lot of parents just being taken advantage of, and again, this is not no disrespect to our immigrant families. My husband, was not born in the U.S., so like it's a little different situation than some of our other folks do. But I do see where parents are coming from, and I have some empathy. But also just, it's also parents understanding, we have to look at this, and we have to center equity, in what we do. And we were really proud of the SFN Alliance to be an affiliate of Our Revolution, which is the organization founded by Bernie Sanders. No, you don't have to be a Bernie Sanders voter to have been, be a part of the San Francisco Education Alliance. But that we are just a part of something bigger, a movement that cares about climate change, a movement that cares about social justice. We were really honored to host Barbara Lee at an event at the Bayview Opera House when Barbara Lee was running her campaign. Our Revolution was supporting her, and we had an Education for All town hall. We had, I think, between 150 and 200 people be there. We had Shaman Walton, who spoke, Shaman has been just an amazing voice for equity in the Board of Supervisors. And we lift him up as the only no vote against the No on G, because he's been in the school board for 8 years, and has just been very, very committed to equity. He was amazing on the school board. So we're just very excited to have this opportunity to have a group where we can bring parents and the City College folks together. I didn't talk a lot about City College. That's maybe I'll just suggest
whole other thing too.
that would be a great episode, just because
Yes.
we feel like we have to have a strong City College to have a strong SFUSD. Prop 13 reform would also benefit City College. And so that's why we organize with students and parents there. We also, faculty there as well. We also started a petition to try to get ESL classes back to a campus in the Haight-Ashbury, John Adams campus. CC College has been cutting the classes that a lot of our parents need. So that is one thing we did. So yeah, we were sort of a reaction to the recalls, but we've also done, one of our members worked with her child who's trans on putting together a Board of Supervisors resolution that was introduced and sponsored by Dean Preston, and was sponsored by all of our supervisors, pushing the district to do more for trans students.
Love it.
And so so we're not just a movement against people. We've also got a vision for things we want to do, and things we want to accomplish, and working toward making things better. So
love it. Thank you so much, Brandee, for taking the time to speak with me. Good luck with tonight, and in all your endeavors.
all right. Thanks so much, Kevin. So excited about the Doom Loop.
I really appreciate it. Alrighty, that was Brandee Marckmann. We appreciate her taking the time to speak with us. And if you want to support her organization, the San Francisco Education Alliance or SF Education Alliance, the URL is sfeducationalliance.com. So pretty easy to find. Uh, Thanks again for joining us for episode 2. And I want to wrap up by talking a little bit about evolution, or at least, ideological evolution. Now, I don't know if you heard, but a former San Francisco district attorney, former San Francisco or California attorney general, and former California senator Kamala Harris recently announced as vice president that it's absurd and unfair that marijuana is treated more seriously than fentanyl under federal law. And she feels now that she doesn't think people who use marijuana should be arrested. Now, that is, of course, a far cry from her previous positions, like when she was district attorney. And let's note that she took over from Terrence Hallinan, who was very ahead of his time on marijuana charges and really declined to follow through on them because they're stupid. But she basically ran on a campaign of I'm going to put criminals in jail and went after marijuana cases, prosecuting 1,900 of them. 1,900 for weed violations. That does include possession, so just holding it. But apparently, and later as the attorney general, when they were looking to legalize marijuana in 2012, 2013, I believe, she did not decline to support it. So now she supports it. Now she thinks he's okay. She's actually being open about smoking marijuana in college. Great. But what it just goes to show is that right wins. The right things, good wins. The right thing to happen still wins. And it might take forever. It might take a long time, but people will come around. So please remember that when you think about what's going on in the world and you start to feel helpless. You can make a change. You can go out and fight for what you think is right. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. But I promise you it's worth it, because at some point, if you're on the right side of history, history will go your way. So again, thanks so much for joining me, Kevin L. Jones, on Doomloop Dispatch. You can follow us on Twitter. I should be getting an Instagram soon. Please like and subscribe our videos on YouTube. We're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So please make sure to leave a review, a positive review, hopefully. And hopefully I'll get a Patreon going soon, because I'm going to have to find some way to support this. But thank you again for supporting us, and keep on fighting the good fight.